young woman risks everything to uncover her village's lost history. Elara, a storyteller of the Tranquil Forest, has just discovered a faded tapestry filled with images of mythic creatures no one remembers. These forgotten spirits once shaped her people's entire way of life, and now their stories are on the verge of vanishing forever. Her village lies safely behind ancient protective wards, but Elara makes a dangerous choice. She will journey beyond them to find the truth, defying the elders and risking exile. By the end of her story, you will understand how a single act of courage can rebuild an entire culture from its myths. What secrets do the old spirits guard, and why were they erased from memory? What would you risk to save the soul of your home? The forest floor crunched softly under Elara's feet as she followed the faded lines on her hand-drawn map. Every shadow seemed to whisper the elder's warnings, but she pressed on, her fingers tracing the parchment that promised a hidden grove. Pushing through a thick curtain of ivy, she found it. Moss clung to a circle of ancient stones, their surfaces worn smooth by centuries of rain and wind. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the place the old stories mentioned only in hushed tones. She knelt before the largest stone, brushing away the damp greenery with a trembling hand. Beneath the moss, the stone was not blank. An intricate carving of a fox-like creature emerged, its lines flowing and elegant. Its single, knowing eye seemed to watch her. Compelled by a force she did not understand, Elara reached out, her fingertips grazing the cool stone. A soft, golden light pulsed from the carving, flowing up her arm in a wave of gentle warmth. The mythic spirits were not just stories. They were real, and they responded to her. A chill of awe warred with a spike of fear. Was she a preserver of culture, or was she, as the elders feared, a fool disturbing a slumbering magic that kept them all safe? The choice was immediate. She would not run. Unrolling a piece of cloth and a stick of charcoal from her pack, she began to carefully make a rubbing, capturing every line of the fox spirit on the fabric. This was proof. As she smoothed the final section, a soft rustle came from the dense undergrowth behind her. The gentle glow of the stone faded, but the feeling of being watched did not. She was no longer alone in the grove. The rustling was not the wind. It was a low, murmuring voice that seemed to come from the circle of ancient willows ahead. Elara crept closer, her journal clutched tight. The long, trailing leaves of the trees swayed, and with each gentle movement, they released not a sound, but a whisper of meaning directly into her mind. She dropped to her knees, her charcoal stick flying across the page as she tried to capture the fragmented phrases. Live with the flow, not against it. The river does not command the stone, it persuades it. Every line she transcribed spoke of a deep, symbiotic bond between her ancestors and the forest itself. This was not just history, it was a set of instructions for living. The mythic creatures were not just protectors, they were teachers. But the whispers grew darker, speaking of a fracture, a great schism when fear made people turn away from the old ways. They built their walls not just to keep dangers out, but to lock their own forgotten knowledge away. A cold knot tightened in Elara's stomach. The elders' warnings echoed, promising safety and warmth back in the village. For a moment, the urge to turn back was a physical pull, but then another whisper curled around her, a question that seemed meant for her alone. Would you rather live a long life of quiet shadows, or a short one filled with true light? The choice was clear. She would not leave. As dusk settled, she built a small, sheltered fire, resolving to stay the night and hear what the willows might reveal at dawn. The ground was hard and the air grew cold, but her commitment was a warmer cloak than any she owned. Through the night, the whispers grew sharper, less like fragments and more like a guided story. They spoke of a hidden sanctuary, a place where the original teachings of the spirits were preserved in their purest form. Hope surged within her. This was what she was meant to find. But the message carried a sharp edge. The sanctuary is guarded, the willows whispered, not by beasts, but by the forest's own memory of betrayal. To reach it, one must prove they remember the old harmony. As the first hint of light touched the horizon, the whispers faded, but in the soft gray of dawn, something new appeared. A path, no wider than her hand, now wound away from the willow circle. It was lined with mushrooms that pulsed with a soft, ethereal glow, their light an undeniable invitation to step deeper into the unknown heart of the woods. The glowing mushroom path led Elara to a stone archway so ancient it seemed grown from the earth itself. Standing before it was a creature of solid shadow and starlight, a badger spirit whose sighs and silence halted her breath. Its eyes held a deep, patient intelligence, and it did not move to block her way so much as become the way itself. A voice, like stones grinding slowly underground, formed words in her mind. You seek the sanctuary. To pass, you must prove you remember the bond you seek. Tell me a story of cooperation, not of conquest. Elara's mind went blank, all the carefully memorized tales from the elders fleeing in a wave of panic. This was not a test of memory, but of meaning. Failure here meant more than being turned away. It meant proving the elders right, that the old ways were truly lost. Her hands trembled, but she closed her eyes and let the anxiety fall away. She would not recite. She would remember. She spoke of the tapestry's image of the fox spirit and the first orchards, how its cleverness showed people where to plant, so the sun and soil would work in perfect harmony, leading to shared harvests that fed human and mythic being alike. She did not list facts. She described the feeling of that first ripe apple, the gratitude, the understanding that they were all part of a single, living system. As she spoke from her heart, the badger spirit's stern posture softened. A low, approving rumble echoed through the clearing. You remember the truth of the telling, not just the tale. The path is yours, storyteller. From its own fur, it plucked a single feather that gleamed with captured moonlight and pressed it into her hand. The moment the feather touched her skin, Elara felt a shift in the forest around her. The victory was immediate, but it was not private. From the deep shadows of the trees, pairs of eyes, cold and curious, now watched her. Her first alliance had been made, but it had also announced her presence to listeners who did not share the Guardian's generosity. Clutching the luminous feather, Elara stepped through the stone arch. The air on the other side was different, thick and humming with a power so old it felt like the very heartbeat of the world. The valley that stretched before her was alive with a soft, internal light, and she knew the sanctuary was close. The valley breathed around her, its light pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. Before Elara stretched a vast, open-air temple, carved not from marble, but from the living rock and ancient trees of the forest itself. Every surface told a story. On towering walls of smooth stone, Vibrant murals depicted her ancestors working side by side with the mythic spirits. They were not building walls to separate themselves, but weaving homes from living branches guided by vine tenders. They celebrated the great solstices, dancing in circles with foxfire and willow wisps, their joy so palpable it felt like a physical ache in her chest. This was not the quiet, fearful life of her village. This was a symphony of coexistence, and her people now lived on a single, broken note. Her hand flew across her journal, charcoal scraping as she tried to capture the sweeping scenes. But with every new sketch, a crushing weight settled on her shoulders. How could she possibly carry the entirety of this lost world back with her? The traditions her village held so dear were pale, fragmented echoes of this profound harmony. Preserving a few drawings felt like trying to hold the ocean in her hands. The responsibility was immense, a burden that threatened to smother the initial spark of wonder. If she brought this back the wrong way, it wouldn't inspire her people. It would shatter their entire understanding of the world. She had to start small, to find a single thread she could follow back to the present. Her eyes settled on one particular mural, smaller and more intimate than the others. It showed a human and a badger spirit, much like the guardian at the arch, seated before a sapling. Their hands and paws were placed together on the young tree's trunk, and from their touch, a soft light flowed into its roots and branches. This was no grand celebration or practical lesson. This was a bonding ritual, a quiet promise of mutual growth. This was the key. If she could understand this single act of connection, she could offer her village not just a history lesson, but a way to begin healing the old fracture. As she committed the ritual's every detail to memory, tracing the lines of the figures with her gaze, the air in the sanctuary began to change. The gentle, rhythmic pulse of light quickened. A soft, crystalline chime echoed through the valley, a sound that had not been heard for generations. It was not a welcome, it was an alarm. From the deep shadows between the carved trees and in the dark mouths of stone alcoves, pairs of eyes began to open, their gazes shifting from dormant slumber to a sharp, awakened wariness, all fixed on the lone human in their sacred heart. The eyes in the shadows did not advance, but parted as the very center of the sanctuary began to shift. From the trunk of the largest, most ancient tree, a form emerged. It was a stag, but one woven from moonlight and living wood, its antlers a sprawling canopy that shimmered with captured starlight. This was the forest sage, and its presence filled the space with a profound and heavy silence. It did not speak. Instead, an image bloomed directly in Elara's mind. She saw her village, but not as it was. She saw it woven into the forest, its huts built around trees, its people laughing with fox spirits and badger beings under a sky filled with gentle, floating lights. The feeling of belonging was so intense it brought tears to her eyes. This was the harmony that had been lost, but the vision shattered, replaced by a searing premonition of a storm. This was no weather event. It was a wave of pure forgetting, a chilling emptiness that swept through the woods, turning the vibrant murals to dust and silencing the whispers of the willows forever. The shared culture would not just fade, it would be utterly erased. Panic clawed at her throat. How could she, a simple storyteller with a handful of charcoal rubbings, stand against such a thing? The sage's gaze was unwavering, and in it, she felt the weight of her own doubt. This was not a task for a scholar, but for a bridge. Could she truly be the link between a world of fearful walls and a world of living light? The storm vision pulsed, a desperate warning. There was no one else. Drawing a shaky breath, she met the sage's luminous eyes. "I will do it," she vowed, her voice a whisper that carried the strength of a promise. "I will use my stories to make them remember. I will rebuild the bond." A ripple of acknowledgement passed through the clearing, but the sage's final vision was a sharp, cold dose of reality. She saw other spirits, twisted by long centuries of neglect and betrayal, their forms sharp and hostile. They saw her not as a restorer, but as another human trespasser, and they would actively work to ensure her mission failed. The path home would be far more dangerous than the path here. The forest sage inclined its magnificent head. From the very tip of one antler, a single leaf, crystallized and glowing with a soft, internal fire, drifted down into her open palm. The moment it touched her skin, the pact was sealed. The mission was now hers to bear, a weight far heavier than any journal or map. Turning her back on the sanctuary's light, Elara stepped onto the path leading home, the crystalline leaf a small, burning star in her hand, a beacon of hope in a gathering darkness. The path home felt shorter, yet infinitely heavier. Elara's return to the village was not a triumphant homecoming, but a quiet infiltration of a forgotten world into a walled one. She went directly to the Elder's Lodge, her pack feeling as though it were filled with stones. Unrolling her charcoal rubbings before them, she placed the glowing feather and the crystalline leaf beside the faded images. Her voice did not tremble as she spoke, not of dangerous magic, but of a lost partnership. She described the Badger Spirit's test, the sanctuary's murals of shared harvests, and the Willow Whispers that taught cooperation with the land. She was not asking for permission, she was presenting evidence of a broken inheritance. The reaction was immediate and fractured. Elder Kale, his eyes alight with a long suppled curiosity, reached a wrinkled hand toward the leaf, its inner fire reflecting in his gaze. He saw not a threat, but a key. But Elder Morwen recoiled as if from a serpent. "You have brought the wild inside our walls," he accused, his voice cold. "You trade our proven safety for the whims of creatures we do not control. Our order is our strength. This magic is chaos." The meeting dissolved into a storm of arguing voices, a perfect mirror of the ancient schism the Willows had whispered of. Elara stood silent in the center of it, the rift in her community widening before her eyes. Confrontation would only harden their fears, so she chose a different path. That evening, she did not argue in the lodge. Instead, she lit a small lantern in the village square and began to speak. She told the story of the fox spirit and the first orchard to a handful of curious listeners, mostly young people whose lives had been defined by the walls they were never to cross. She showed them the sketch of the bonding ritual, the human and badger spirit nurturing the sapling together. It was not a lecture, but an invitation. The gathering was small, but the spark it lit was real. Whispers of the old stories began to wind through the village, carried on the voices of the youth. Yet with every spark of curiosity, the shadows of fear deepened in the elders who watched from their doorways. The community was pulling itself apart along a new, fragile seam. As the last of her small audience drifted away, a young woman named Lyra lingered, her face pale in the lantern light. "Elara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The forest, it is watching us. The birds fell silent at the tree line an hour ago, and the badgers are digging at the base of the great wall, as if they are trying to find a way in. The air at the forest's edge was thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. Elara stood with her small band of volunteers, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of her lantern and the fading dusk. In her hands, she held a young oak sapling, its roots carefully wrapped in cloth, soaked with water from a sacred spring she had mapped in the sanctuary. This was not a rebellion, she had told them, but a restoration. They were not here to command, but to ask. Following the mural's guidance, they formed a circle around the sapling, their hands placed gently on its slender trunk or on the shoulders of the person beside them. Elara began the chant, the words the Willow Whispers had gifted her, a low, rhythmic hum of gratitude for the soil and the sun and the rain. For a long moment, nothing happened, and she felt a prickle of doubt. Then, a soft chirping melody wove through their chant. From the canopy above, a spirit descended, its form like a wren woven from living leaves and motes of sunlight. It circled their group once, then twice, before alighting on the sapling's highest branch. A shower of gentle, golden light drifted from its wings, settling over the nearby field of barley. The ceremony ended in a breathless, shared silence. The spirit gave a final, musical trill and vanished back into the woods. The true wonder revealed itself days later. That same barley field, which should have yielded a modest harvest weeks from then, ripened overnight. The stalks grew thick and golden, heavy with grain, an abundance that defied all seasonal logic. The volunteers were ecstatic, their faith in Elara and the old ways solidified into undeniable proof. Yet as they celebrated, Elara felt a cold knot of anxiety tighten within her. Success could be more dangerous than failure. She gathered her followers, her voice firm. This blessing was a gift, not a transaction, she reminded them. We must show gratitude, not expectation. We respect their power, we do not seek to own it. Her caution was a necessary shield, for the miracle did exactly what she feared. It drew more villagers to her fire each night, their curiosity overpowering their fear, but it also sharpened the divisions within the community. Whispers of unnatural magic and broken taboos now slithered through the lanes alongside tales of the blessed harvest. And then came the other rumors. A hunter spoke of a tall, gaunt figure made of twisted bark and thorns, watching from the deep wood, its eyes like cold embers. Another claimed the stream near the wall ran black for an entire afternoon. As her group dispersed that evening, laughing and hopeful, Elara glanced at the luminous feather tucked into her journal. Its soft moonlit glow had faded, now pulsing with a faint, warning flicker, like a distant star being swallowed by clouds. The air tasted of damp soil and coming rain as Elara knelt by the stream, her fingers searching for moon-bloom herbs in the fading twilight. A low growl rumbled from the trees behind her, a sound that had no place in the forest's nightly chorus. She turned slowly. 3 shadowy forms detached themselves from the gloom, wolf-like spirits, woven from smoke and thorn. Their eyes burned with a cold, amber light, and they fanned out to block the path back to the village. Their message was clear. She was not welcome here. Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. Instinct screamed at her to run, but flight would only prove their suspicion right, that humans were fearful creatures. She stood her ground, her hand closing around the crystalline leaf in her pocket. As the lead spirit took a menacing step forward, bearing teeth of splintered darkness, she drew the leaf out. It flared to life in her palm, its inner fire erupting into a sphere of pure, blinding light that pushed the advancing shadows back several paces. They did not vanish. They recoiled with furious snarls, their forms shimmering at the edge of the protective glow, their hostility undimmed. This was not a victory, it was a standoff. The easy path would be to hold the light until she could retreat, to meet their aggression with her own defensive power, but that would only deepen the rift. She thought of the murals, of the intricate greetings between species. Lowering the leaf so its light softened, she raised her empty hand, palm open. She spoke the words of an old greeting she had transcribed from the sanctuary wall, her voice steady despite the tremor in her soul. "We walk the same earth," she said. "I mean your world no harm." The shadow spirits fell silent, their growls ceasing. They did not advance, but their cold, intelligent eyes studied her, weighing the truth of her words against centuries of betrayal. This was the true test of her mission, balancing the need for safety with the desperate pursuit of peace. The emergence of these twisted beings revealed a civil war among the spirits themselves, a schism her people's forgetting had helped to create. Her success would require more than rebuilding a bond. It would mean healing a wound she had not made. After a long, tense moment, the spirits melted back into the forest, but the feeling of being watched clung to her like a shroud. She hurried back toward the village, the leaf's warmth a small comfort. But as the torchlight of the palisade wall came into view, she saw it. The protective wards etched into the great wooden gates, which usually glowed with a steady, soft blue, were now flickering erratically. At the tree line, just beyond their light, the same amber eyes gleamed from the darkness. The shadow spirits had followed her home, and their mere presence was enough to threaten the very walls that had defined her people's safety for generations. The great hall was a storm of frightened voices. The flickering wards at the gate were all anyone could talk about, a tangible sign that the safety they had taken for granted was failing. Every shadow in the lane outside was now a potential threat. Every rustle of leaves a whisper of invasion. Elder Morwen stood before the assembled villagers, his face etched with grim satisfaction. "This is the chaos she has invited," he declared, pointing a trembling finger at Elara. "The spirits she awakens are not gentle guides. They are the very reason our ancestors built these walls. We must end this foolishness, seal the gates tighter, and cast out the one who brought this upon us." The crowd erupted. Shouts of agreement mingled with cries of protest. Families were fracturing before her eyes, a father yelling at his son, lifelong friends, turning their backs on one another. Elara felt the weight of their fear like a physical blow. To fight them would only prove Morwen's point, that she was a disruptive force. She waited for the noise to subside, her own heart pounding, before she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the hall. "The walls have kept us safe," she began, "but they have also made us blind. The shadow spirits are not monsters from a fable. They are a consequence. They are the forest's memory of our betrayal, given form. To fight them with more fear and stronger walls is to repeat the mistake that created them." She saw the doubt on their faces, the terror warring with a flicker of curiosity. "We cannot win a war against the forest itself," she continued, but we can seek to understand the grievance. I propose we do not send warriors. I propose we send a delegation to the forest sage to ask for its counsel. Let us seek peace, not provoke a conflict we cannot hope to win. A stunned silence fell over the room. The idea was so foreign, so contrary to their entire history of isolation, that it took a moment to process. Then the arguments began anew, but now the division was clear. One faction, led by Elder Kale and the younger villagers who had tasted the miracle of the barley field, saw the wisdom in her words. The other, larger and louder, saw it as the ultimate blasphemy. As the meeting adjourned without a clear decision, the rift in the community was a raw, open wound. That evening, Lyra found Elara by her hearth. "My father forbade me from speaking with you," she whispered, her eyes red-rimmed. "He says you are leading us to ruin." The words cut deeper than any spirit's growl. The personal cost of her quest was becoming unbearable. Yet, a small group gathered with her as dusk deepened, their resolve firm. They would go to the sage, with or without the village's official blessing. They knew the shadow spirits would be waiting on the path, their amber eyes watching from the darkness, and that this journey would test more than their courage. It would test their very belief in the possibility of peace. The journey into the deep woods was a silent, deliberate retreat from the world of walls. Elara led her small band, her path illuminated only by the gentle, unwavering glow of the crystalline leaf and the soft moonlight captured in the badger spirit's feather. They moved like whispers, avoiding the trails where they had last seen the amber eyes of the shadow spirits, their every sense tuned to the forest's mood. The woods were not a monolith, a family of rabbit-like spirits, their fur the color of moss and morning dew, hopped alongside them for a stretch, their twitching noses pointing them away from a thicket that hummed with a faint, hostile energy. A little later, a silent owl with feathers like polished bark landed on a low branch directly in their path, swiveling its head to stare intently at a fork in the game trail before giving a single, soft hoot and taking flight down the left path. The forest itself was guiding them, its benevolent children choosing sides in a quiet war. This help was a comfort, but it was also a stark reminder that the conflict was real, and the stakes were the soul of the woods. The terrain grew more challenging, forcing them to navigate a narrow ledge above a rushing stream. It was there they heard the panicked, high-pitched cries. A young fox kit was trapped between two fallen logs, its leg pinned and bleeding. "We do not have time for this," one of the supporters hissed, his eyes darting nervously into the shadows. "Every moment we delay brings them closer." Elara did not hesitate. "If we abandon one creature in need, we betray the very harmony we seek," she said, her voice firm as she knelt in the cold water. She could not command the logs to move, but she could offer calm. Humming the Willow Whispers chant, she worked gently to free the terrified animal, her actions a quiet sermon on the meaning of their quest. Her unwavering compassion in the face of danger solidified her followers' trust, transforming their fear into a shared, purposeful resolve. The delay, however, came with a cost. As they finally freed the kit and it limped away, a chilling howl echoed from the ridge above. The shadow spirits had used the time to circle them. In the frantic scramble that followed, one of the younger supporters, Lyra, became separated, her faint cry swallowed by the dense undergrowth. For 10 heart-stopping minutes, they searched, the feeling of imminent danger a cold clamp around Elara's chest. When they found her, trembling but unharmed behind a waterfall, the relief was palpable but short-lived. Reunited and weary, they pushed on, and as they crested a final rise, the sage's grove lay in the valley below, a pool of serene, ancient light. But above it, the sky was no longer clear. Thick, bruised purple clouds churned silently, and the first cold drop of rain struck Elara's cheek like a warning. The air in the grove was thick with the scent of ozone and old magic. From the deepest pool of shadow beneath the ancient trees, a form emerged, solidifying into a panther-like entity of obsidian sleekness and chilling grace. Its eyes were not amber like its followers, but held the piercing, cold light of distant stars. This was their leader, and its voice, when it spoke, was the sound of ice cracking on a frozen river. You returned to the place your kind betrayed. You abandoned the pact when the great blight came. You took the magic we offered to save your crops, and when the danger passed, you raised your walls and forgot our names. The accusation hung in the air, a historical wound laid bare. Elara felt the weight of every fearful elder, every reinforced wall, every forgotten story. To defend her village would be to lie. She met the leader's gaze, her own voice soft but unwavering. I cannot speak for the choices of those who came before me. I can only speak for myself, and for those who wish to remember. We were wrong to turn away from you. The silence that followed her apology was deeper than any she had known. The shadow leader studied her, its starlit eyes searching for any flicker of deceit. You offer words, little storyteller. Words are fragile. They are easily spoken and easily broken. We remember the weight of actions. To even consider a new beginning, you must prove your people are capable of more than regret. You must restore what was stolen. It told her of a relic, a moonstone basin used in the old bonding rituals, taken by a frightened villager during the schism and hidden away in a place of echoing danger, the Whispering Caves. Bring us the basin, cleanse it of the fear that taints it. This is not a request for a symbol, but for an action. Do this, and we will listen. The challenge was immense, the caves a place of legend and peril. But Elara saw it not as an obstacle, but as the first, tangible step toward healing. She bowed her head in acceptance. Without another word, she turned from the grove, her small group falling into step behind her, their path now set toward the dark mouth of the caves and the tangible proof their fractured world required. The entrance to the Whispering Caves was a scar in the mountainside, exhaling a breath of cold, damp air that carried the faint, mocking sound of their own whispers back to them. Inside, the darkness was absolute, broken only by their small lanterns, which seemed to shrink before the oppressive silence. The caves did not attack with claws or teeth. They attacked with memory. The very first echo that returned to them was not a sound, but a feeling, a wave of personal regret that washed over each of them. One of Elara's followers cried out, clutching his head as he relived a bitter argument with his brother. Another froze, whispering apologies to a friend she felt she had failed. The labyrinth was not of stone, but of their own deepest fears, and the path forward was a test of their resolve to move past them. Elara felt the cave's pressure too, a cold whisper in her mind, questioning every choice. Were you a fool to believe you could mend a fracture centuries old? Did you lead these people to their doom for a fantasy? The team began to fray, their unity cracking under the psychic assault. Arguments sparked over which tunnel to take, their fear turning inward, threatening to make them enemies. Seeing their trust dissolve, Elara did not command them. She sat right there in the oppressive dark and began to tell a story. It was the tale from the sanctuary mural of the human and the badger spirit nurturing the sapling. She described not just the action, but the feeling behind it, the shared vulnerability, the mutual need, the quiet trust that allowed the light to flow between them. Her voice, steady and calm, became an anchor in the storm of echoes. The story was a reminder of their purpose, a shield against the cave's distortions. It reforged their bond, not as leader and followers, but as companions on a shared, sacred journey. With their spirits realigned, the caves shifted. A riddle formed from the dripping water and the sighing wind, a puzzle about the nature of harmony. Together, they pieced together the answer, and a hidden passage ear-eyed open, revealing a small alcove. There, resting on a natural pedestal, was the relic not a basin, but a flute carved from pure, milky moonstone. As Elara's fingers closed around the cool, smooth stone, a deep groan shuddered through the mountain. The tunnel behind them collapsed in a roar of dust and falling rock, sealing their only known way out. There was no time for panic. They had the flute, but the mountain had become their prison. For what felt like hours, they navigated by touch and intuition through uncharted, suffocatingly narrow tunnels, guided only by a faint, fresh breeze they desperately hoped was not another trick. When they finally pushed through a curtain of thick roots into the blinding sun of a clearing, their relief was short-lived. Standing in a silent, watchful semicircle were the Shadow Leader and its pack. Their starlit eyes were unreadable, fixed on the Moonstone Flute in Elara's hand. The trial of the caves was over. The true test of their promise was about to begin. Elara raised the Moonstone Flute to her lips, her breath a silent prayer. The first note was not a sound, but a vibration that traveled through the very ground beneath their feet. It was a low, clear tone that did not command, but invited. As she played the simple, ancient melody the Shadow Leader had shown her in a vision, the air began to shimmer. Ghostly images bloomed around the clearing, not of grand battles or betrayals, but of quiet, shared moments. A human child offering a berry to a young fox spirit. A badger and a farmer working together to shore up a riverbank against the spring floods. The music was weaving a tapestry of their shared past, reminding them all of what they had once been to each other. The hardened forms of the shadow spirits seemed to waver, their edges softening as the cold light in their eyes warmed to a gentle, remembered glow. One by one, they began to move, their steps at first hesitant, then flowing into a slow, graceful dance that mirrored the flute's rising and falling melody. Elara's heart soared, but her focus was absolute. She knew this piece was as fragile as a spider's web. A single note of fear or doubt from her could shatter the entire moment. She poured every ounce of her empathy into the song, letting it channel not just memory, but a profound, aching hope for the future. Then, driven by an instinct deeper than instruction, she began to improvise. The melody shifted, taking on a darker, more mournful tone. This new verse told their story, the spirit's story of abandonment, the long, silent centuries of watching the walls go up, the deep, gnawing loneliness of being forgotten. She played their pain and their longing, honoring their grievance not as a threat, but as a justified sorrow. As this new music filled the air, the shadow leader itself ceased its dance. It tilted its head, and for the first time, a single, shimmering tear of condensed starlight traced a path down its sleek, dark fur. The successful melody was doing more than creating a temporary truce. A visible crackle of energy, like lightning healing a wound, flashed across the spiritual rift that had divided the woods. The very light in the clearing grew brighter, purer. But such powerful magic could not go unnoticed. From the forest sage emerged, its antlers of living wood and captured starlight, casting a new, solemn light over the gathering. It was followed by the Badger Guardian, the Willow Wisps, and a host of other benevolent spirits, drawn by the song of reconciliation. They stood in a silent, awe-filled circle, witnesses to a turning point none had believed possible. As the last resonant note from the flute faded into a profound silence, the sage stepped forward, its immense presence holding the entire clearing in a state of breathless anticipation. The sanctuary valley shimmered with a light it had not known for generations. The forest sage's call had been answered, and the air itself hummed with the presence of spirits of every conceivable form. Foxfire wisps floated in gentle orbits around the ancient trees, while stoic badger beings stood shoulder to shoulder with villagers who had, until recently, never dared look beyond their own walls. It was a breathtaking spectacle of tentative unity, a living tapestry woven from the very threads Elara had worked so hard to reclaim. The first exchanges were quiet, formal, a careful dance of curiosity and deeply ingrained caution. But then the gifts began. A villager offered a loaf of bread baked with grain from the blessed barley field, and in return, a vine-tender spirit guided their hands to weave a stronger, living roof for their meeting space. A young man showed a spirit how to mend a leather strap, and the spirit, in turn, showed him a hidden spring with water that could soothe a fever. These were not grand gestures, but small, practical acts of collaboration that began to heal the land itself, revitalizing a patch of blighted earth near the stream where villagers and tree root spirits worked side by side. Yet the harmony was fragile. Elara noticed the small clusters of resistance. A group of elders, including Morwen, stood apart with crossed arms, their suspicion a visible chill in the warm air. Across the clearing, a few spirits with thorns still bristling at their edges mirrored that stance, their amber eyes narrowed. The old arguments were a whisper away from erupting and shattering this delicate peace. Seeing the danger, Elara did not make a speech. She moved to the center of the gathering, sat upon the soft moss, and simply began to speak. She told a story of her own loneliness within the walled village, of the hollow feeling that had driven her into the woods. Then she invited others to do the same. One by one, villagers and spirits stepped into the circle. A farmer spoke of his fear of failed harvests, and a badger spirit rumbled a tale of its den being flooded by a river humans had diverted long ago. A shadow spirit, its voice like shifting gravel, shared the profound silence of being forgotten. Each story was a different melody, but they all sang the same song of loss and the quiet, stubborn ember of hope. The storytelling circle did not erase centuries of hurt, but it built a bridge of raw, shared empathy across the divide. As the gathering began to wind down under the soft glow of twilight, a palpable sense of fragile hope settled over the valley. The peace was real, but it was new, and its roots were still shallow. The shadow leader approached Elara, its form less a thing of menacing darkness and more a silhouette of the coming night. It did not speak aloud, but pressed a cool, smooth river stone into her palm. The moment her fingers closed around it, a vision blossomed behind her eyes. She saw not a threat, but a vast, sleeping power deep within the earth, a wellspring of magic that was slowly fading. The vision was an invitation and a warning. The true work of rebuilding their world was just beginning, and it would require a unity far deeper than any gathering could provide. The river stone's vision of a fading magic did not leave Elara, even as she returned to the daily work of weaving two worlds together. Back in the village, the change was no longer a whispered hope, but a tangible reality. She worked side by side with Elder Kale and the Badger Guardian, integrating the rediscovered practices into the very rhythm of life. Farmers now consulted with vine-tender spirits on where to plant, resulting in fields that pulsed with health and yielded crops of impossible abundance. The protective wards etched into the Great Wall, once flickering and frail, were now reinforced with spirals of living ivy, guided by the Willow Wisps, glowing with a steady, vibrant light that was both ancient and new. The first joint festival of the equinox was their greatest achievement, a celebration that wove human music with the chimes of spirit song, honoring both lineages under a canopy of shared stars. The village was not just surviving, it was thriving, its identity beautifully remade from the fragments of a forgotten past. But this vibrant new tapestry had its frayed edges. A small, stubborn faction of traditionalists, led by Elder Morwen, watched the changes with simmering resentment. They saw the spirit-guided farming as a loss of human control, and the festivals as a betrayal of their ancestors' isolationist wisdom. Their dissent was not loud, but it was deep, manifesting in whispered rumors and the occasional, mysterious sabotage. A carefully tended spirit sapling found uprooted, a storage shed of joint harvests set alight. The unity Elara had fought for was being tested from within. Confronting the saboteurs directly would only fracture the community further, proving their fears correct. So Elara chose a different path. She went to Morwen and his followers not with accusations, but with an invitation. She asked them to help plan the next great festival, the solstice celebration, giving them a formal voice in deciding the rituals, the food, and the stories to be told. It was a risk, offering a platform to those who opposed her, but it acknowledged their fears and valued their place in the community. Slowly, grudgingly, some of the dissenters began to participate. They saw that their concerns for tradition were being heard, and that the new ways did not seek to erase the old, but to complete them. A handful even found a quiet pride in helping to build something stronger than walls. This hard-won integration proved the profound value of unity, transforming the village into a living testament to a restored bond. Yet such a radiant success could not remain hidden. It made the community a beacon of light in a world that had long grown accustomed to shadows. During the joyous chaos of the first solstice festival, with villagers and spirits dancing together under the hanging lanterns, Elara's laughter caught in her throat. Her eyes, scanning the happy crowd, settled on the dark tree line. There, standing perfectly still and separate from the celebration, was a stranger. His clothes were of an unfamiliar cut, and his gaze held not wonder, but a sharp, calculating intensity. that belonged to neither village nor spirit kind. The stranger did not join the celebration, his stillness a stark contrast to the swirling dance of lantern light and spirit song. When Elara finally approached him, his name was Kalen, and he was a storyteller like her, from a settlement many days' travel to the east. He spoke of hearing whispers on the wind, tales of a forest that had been healed, and a village that walked with spirits. "My people live in a land slowly turning to dust," he explained, his voice heavy with a yearning she recognized. "We have forgotten the old songs. I came to see if your miracle could be learned." His request landed in the heart of the community, like a stone in a still pond, sending out ripples of immediate debate. Elder Morwen and his traditionalists saw only danger. "He will take our secrets and leave us with nothing," Morwen argued, his distrust now shared by some of the more cautious spirits, whose thorny edges seemed to sharpen at the idea of their magic being carried away. But others, including the now hopeful followers of Kale, saw a greater purpose. "Is this not why we were given this knowledge, to be a light for others?" They countered, "To hide our success would be to build a new, prettier wall." The community was divided once more, not by fear of each other, but by fear of the outside world. Elara listened to all of it, the weight of leadership, a familiar cloak upon her shoulders. She understood the terror of exploitation, of seeing their delicate balance shattered by careless hands. But she also remembered the profound loneliness of forgetting, and she could not condemn another community to that fate. Her decision was a careful, deliberate middle path. She would not give Kalen their deepest rituals or the location of their most sacred places. Instead, she proposed an exchange. He could learn the basic principles of coexistence, the stories of the fox spirit and the first orchard, the simple chant of gratitude for the soil, the concept of asking rather than commanding. In return, he would pledge, on the honor of his own ancestors, to approach his homeland with respect, to observe first and act only with permission, and to never use the knowledge for domination. It was a test of his character as much as a transfer of wisdom. Kalen agreed without hesitation, his eyes alight with a sincerity that eased some of the tension. For days, he sat with Elara and the spirits, his own journal filling with sketches and notes, his questions thoughtful and deep, but his presence was a beacon. Other travelers, drawn by the same rumors, began to appear at the forest's edge, their gazes curious and their intentions unknown. The very act of sharing their light was attracting more attention than the community had ever known, and with it, a new kind of pressure. When Kalen finally departed with a promise to return and share his progress, Elara stood at the gate, watching him disappear into the trees. The crystalline leaf in her pocket felt warm, almost humming with a new, unfamiliar energy. Their story was no longer contained within the Tranquil Forest. It had become a seed carried on the wind, and she could only hope it would grow into a tree of harmony in distant soil, and not a thorny vine of greed that would one day choke their own hard-won peace. The first sign was a single blackened leaf falling from the ancient willow at the grove's center. Within days, the blight spread like a dark tide, twisting vibrant green into brittle gray. The very heart of the forest was sickening, and with it, the fragile trust between human and spirit unraveled. A farmer pointed a trembling finger at a vine-tender spirit, accusing its unfamiliar magic of poisoning the soil. A shadow spirit snarled back, its form flickering with weak anger, claiming the villagers had brought a human pestilence from beyond their walls. The air, once filled with tentative hope, now crackled with old fears and new accusations. Elara stood in the center of the storm, watching the alliance she had bled for teeter on the edge of collapse. If the blight was not stopped, it would consume not just the trees, but everything they had rebuilt. Her leadership faced its ultimate test. She could not let them retreat into their separate corners of blame. Calling for a tense gathering, she overrode the arguing voices with a single, firm proposal. We will not point fingers, we will find answers together. She formed a joint research team, pairing the village's most skilled herbalists with spirits who understood the flow of magical energies. They would work side by side, diagnosing this sickness not as a human problem or a spirit problem, but as a shared threat. The stakes could not have been higher. Every hour, the blight spread further, causing crops in the shared fields to wither to dust and making the benevolent spirits grow faint and translucent. The shadow spirits, their forms wavering, watched with cold, silent judgment. If this team failed, the forest's heart would die, and the renewed alliance would shatter into 1,000 broken pieces, leaving them more divided and vulnerable than ever before. For days, the team toiled, comparing notes on soil composition and magical resonance, their initial suspicion slowly giving way to a grim, shared purpose. Then the breakthrough came. It was not a natural rot or a known human blight. The corruption was magical in nature, a virulent spell woven with a specific, malicious intent. The sickness was not an accident, it was an attack. The trail of magical corruption led them deep into the woods, to a cave hidden behind a waterfall they all knew well. Inside, huddled over a flickering, sickly purple flame, was Finn, a quiet villager who had always kept to the old ways. He did not fight them as they entered. His face was a mask of weary defiance, his hands stained with the same dark energy that was poisoning the grove. "You built a new world," he said, his voice hollow, "but you had no place in it for those of us who could not forget the fear." "I was not trying to destroy the forest. I only wanted to show that your fragile peace was a lie, that we were safer apart." The choice before Elara was stark and immediate. Exile or punishment would only confirm his belief that the new order was just as exclusionary as the old. But to forgive him felt like a betrayal to every spirit and villager suffering from his actions. Her decision came not from a place of weakness, but from a profound understanding of the story he represented. "Finn," she said, her voice steady, "you love this forest as much as any of us. I see that now. Your anger came from feeling unheard, so I will not cast you out. Instead, I ask you to use your knowledge, however misdirected, to help us heal what you have harmed. You will work beside us to cleanse the grove." His defiance crumbled into stunned silence, then a slow, reluctant nod. The public redemption of their saboteur became a powerful lesson for the entire community. It proved that their unity was not about perfect agreement, but about the capacity to mend broken trust. Yet it also laid bare a painful truth, that harmony required constant vigilance against the loneliness of those left behind. With Finn guiding them to the precise points of corruption, the joint team now prepared for the counter-ritual. For the first time in living memory, human resolve and spirit magic would be woven together, not just in practice, but in a desperate, shared act of salvation. The air in the blighted grove was thick with the scent of decay and desperate hope. Elara stood at its center, the Moonstone Flute cool in her hands, flanked by villagers and spirits whose shared anxiety was a palpable force. This was no simple ceremony. It was a delicate surgery on the soul of the forest itself, and its success hinged on a harmony more profound than any they had yet attempted. One faltering note, one whisper of doubt, and the corrupted magic could lash out, poisoning the land beyond all recovery. Elara's gaze swept over the assembled faces, her decision clear. She handed the sacred bundle of purification, herbs, not to her most loyal follower, but to Finn, the Saboteur, his hands still faintly stained with the evidence of his crime. Then she nodded to the shadow spirit leader, its form still flickering with weakness, to take the position of anchoring the protective circle. Trust was not a feeling, it was an action, and she was placing the fate of their entire world into the hands of those who had most fiercely opposed it. A low, clear note from the flute cut through the tension, a single thread of sound in the oppressive silence. Finn began the incantation, his voice trembling at first, then growing stronger as the villagers around him joined in. The shadow leader extended its claws, not in threat, but to channel a stream of pure, dark energy that wove a net of stability around the grove, containing the corruption. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft green light began to pulse from the base of the ancient willow, flowing up through the gray, twisted branches in a wave of revitalizing power. The incantation and the flute's melody intertwined, human voice and spirit magic, becoming a single resonant chord that pushed back the blight. Where the gray decay had been, vibrant, impossible flowers burst from the soil, their petals shimmering with captured moonlight, and fruit heavy with nourishing magic swelled on the branches. The grove did not just heal, it transcended, becoming a living monument to their restored bond. The collective sigh of relief was like a wind sweeping through the clearing. Farmers and vine tenders embraced, their earlier accusations forgotten in the shared wonder. Finn stood with tears streaming down his face, the weight of his guilt finally lifted by the tangible proof of his redemption. In that moment, Elara was no longer just a storyteller or a leader. She was the living heart of a new culture, the undeniable proof that courage and empathy could rebuild a broken world. The success cemented her authority, but it also placed a heavier crown upon her head. Every eye looked to her now not just for guidance, but for miracles, the expectation, a new kind of wall being built around her. As the celebrations began to blossom throughout the renewed grove, the forest sage approached, its immense presence casting a gentle shadow. The time has come, it spoke into her mind, its voice the rustle of a million leaves, to weave our pact into the memory of the world itself. We shall convene a great gathering, a joining of all clans and spirits, to formalize our bond in a ceremony that will be told for 1,000 generations. The proposal was both an honor and a monumental challenge, a task that would demand everything she had learned and more. The planning for the great gathering became its own intricate ritual. Elara knew that for the pact to be truly woven into their world's memory, the event itself had to be a product of shared hands and hearts. Her first decision was to form a council, not of her most loyal followers, but of the most diverse voices she could find. An elder from Morwen's faction sat beside the shadow spirit leader. A young farmer who had once feared the woods shared a table with a vine tender known for its prickly disposition. Equal representation was not just a principle, it was a practical necessity, and it immediately tested her skills. The first debates were chaotic. The spirits envisioned a ceremony that would last 3 days, flowing with the forest's own timeless rhythms. The villagers, bound by their practical needs, argued for a single, structured day, with clear schedules for meals and speeches. A spirit suggested a ritual dance under the new moon, while a villager countered with the need for well-lit paths for the children. Each logistical challenge was a microcosm of their larger cultural divide. Elara did not command a solution, she facilitated one. She listened, she translated needs, and she found the common ground. The dance could be held at dusk, a bridge between day and night. The paths would be lined not with torches, but with the gentle, guiding light of cooperative foxfire wisps. The entire community threw itself into the labor. Humans with strong backs helped spirits move ancient stones for a new ceremonial platform, while spirits with a knowledge of living wood guided human hands in weaving beautiful, temporary arches from supple willow branches. They were not just building a festival site, they were building a shared sense of ownership. The air filled with the sounds of collaboration, the scent of sawdust and blooming night flowers, and a growing, palpable pride in what they were creating together. Yet the tension of last-minute disagreements was a constant hum beneath the surface. Just 2 days before the gathering, a conflict erupted over the joint artifact, a tapestry meant to be woven by every clan and species. The colors chosen by the human weavers were deemed too bold and garish by the spirits of the glen, who preferred subtle, earthy tones. For a moment, the old resentments flared, each side seeing the other's preference as a dismissal of their very essence. Elara, her patience frayed from a week of little sleep, did not take sides. She gathered samples of the vibrant dyes and the muted mosses, laying them side by side. What if, she proposed, the tapestry tells the story of our journey? It could begin with the deep, shadowy hues of the forgotten times, weave through the bright, bold thread of rediscovery and conflict, and finally settle into the harmonious, blended palette of our present peace. The solution transformed the disagreement into a creative breakthrough. On the eve of the gathering, Elara walked alone through the transformed forest. Lanterns floated like captive stars among the branches, and the new willow arches stood as graceful portals between the worlds of human and spirit. The clearing was ready, a testament to their collective will. She could feel the anticipation in the very air, a hopeful energy that made her skin prickle. But beneath her quiet pride lay a deep, humming nervousness. Tomorrow was not just a celebration, it was a verdict. Every word spoken, every ritual performed, would either solidify their bond for generations or reveal the cracks they had so carefully plastered over. The legacy of her entire quest now rested on the success of a single, sunlit day. The clearing hummed with a silence more profound than any sound. Every villager, every spirit, from the smallest wisp to the most ancient badger, stood with their attention fixed on the center, where Elara and the forest sage stood before a young sapling cradled in a basin of rich, dark soil. Their voices, one human and one echoing with the weight of the woods, wove together the words of the new pact, a vow of mutual guardianship and shared growth. Then, together, they lowered the sapling into the earth. Elara pressed her palm to the soil on one side, while the sage touched the trunk with the tip of its glowing antler. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, life erupted. The tree surged upward, its branches unfurling in a whisper of moving wood, and from every twig burst flowers that glowed with a soft, internal silver light. The air itself seemed to sigh, filled with a palpable sense of peace that washed over the gathered crowd, a feeling not of an ending, but of a beautiful, daunting beginning. Yet, as cheers and spirit song filled the clearing, Elara felt a familiar knot of worry tighten in her chest. A single, perfect ceremony could inspire, but could it mend a torn cloak on a rainy day, or settle a dispute over a damaged field? The symbols were powerful, but daily life was made of smaller, harder choices. The unity had to be woven into the very fabric of their existence, into the stories they told their children. She stepped forward, her voice carrying over the joyful noise. To ensure this pact lives in our hearts, and not just in our memories, I propose we found a Storytellers Guild. But it will not be mine alone. It will be a council of voices, human and spirit, tasked with preserving our true history and guiding its evolution with every new season. The announcement was met with nods of approval, a practical first step to cement the day's magic into everyday tradition. The success of the gathering did not go unnoticed by the wider world. As the bioluminescent tree cast its gentle light, new, unfamiliar mythic beings began to emerge from the forest's deepest shadows. A great eagle, whose feathers were like polished granite, and a serpent that moved with the fluid grace of a river. They had come from distant woods, drawn by the restored harmony, seeking counsel and alliance. The movement was growing, its influence spreading like roots through stone. But with that growth came the intricate challenges of managing new relationships and conflicting needs. Later, as the celebration swirled around her, a quiet whisper curled into Elara's mind, a summons as gentle as a falling leaf. The forest sage awaited her in the sacred grove. The joy of the day was suddenly tempered by the weight of a new, unspoken question. What more would be asked of the one who had already given so much to rebuild their world? The grove was hushed, the air still and heavy with the scent of night-blooming jasmine. The forest sage led Elara away from the celebration's distant music, its luminous form a silent guide through the sleeping woods. In a secluded clearing where moonlight pooled like liquid silver, it turned to her. Its voice was not a sound in her ears, but a blossoming in her mind, a vision unfolding with the clarity of a waking dream. She saw not just her own forest, but a vast, sprawling map of the world. In a dozen different lands, she witnessed flickers of the same struggle human communities, living in fear beside mythic beings, twisted by neglect. But she also saw sparks of hope, tiny points of light, where storytellers and brave spirits were tentatively reaching out, just as she had. Their story was not an ending, but a single, brightly woven thread in a grand, unfinished tapestry of reconciliation. The vision faded, leaving her breathless. The sage's final teaching was not a secret ritual, but a sobering truth. Your work here has lit a beacon, it intoned. Others will now seek its flame. You must become a guide for them. A cold wave of dread washed over Elara. The thought of leaving her hard-won home, of facing the vast, unknown conflicts of distant lands, made her soul feel small and weary. She had risked everything for the Tranquil Forest, and the deep, human part of her longed to finally rest within its peaceful groves, to live the quiet life of a simple storyteller. Could she bear the weight of being a symbol to the world, The sage waited, its starlit eyes holding no judgment, only infinite patience. The choice was hers alone. Looking inward, Elara searched for the girl who had first stepped beyond the wall, driven by a lonely curiosity. That girl had grown into a woman who understood that a story untold is a seed that never sprouts. She thought of Kalen, the traveler from the east, and knew there would be countless others like him, yearning for a path out of the shadows. Her desire for peace was not a reason to retreat, but the very reason she had to step forward. "I will go where I am needed," she vowed, her voice steady in the quiet glade. "I will teach what I have learned, but this forest is my home and my heart. It must remain the anchor, the living proof that this harmony is possible." She would train apprentices, sharing not just knowledge but the wisdom of her mistakes. She would travel as an ambassador, but always return to the soil that had nurtured her. This decision was a final, irrevocable turning point, a commitment to a lifetime of leadership, with all its exhausting journeys and its profound rewards. The sage inclined its great head in acceptance. The pact was now a living chain, and she had chosen to become one of its strongest links. Returning to her hut, as the first hints of dawn tinted the sky, Elara did not sleep. She lit a single candle, gathered her worn journals and charcoal sketches, and began the most important story of her life. She started drafting a guidebook, weaving together her notes, the transcribed whispers of the willows, the details of the bonding rituals, and the hard-earned lessons on navigating distrust. This would be her legacy, a manual of hope designed to outlive her, so that any hand in any forest could learn how to rebuild a broken world. The guidebook lay open on Elara's work table, its pages a testament to a journey that felt both complete and endlessly beginning. Her own hands had written the words, but she knew a story penned by one hand could only reach so far. The true work of weaving a lasting culture required more than a book. It needed new voices. She chose her apprentices with deliberate care. Lyra, the young woman who had first whispered of the forest's watchful eyes, represented the village's vibrant curiosity. And for the spirit kind, she selected a young fox wisp named Ember, a being of flickering light and quick, insightful questions. Their first lessons were not held in a quiet room, but out in the living world, walking the paths where history had been made. Elara taught them the art of the story, not as a dry recitation of facts, but as a living bridge. She showed them how to listen to the whispers in the willow leaves and translate the low rumble of a badger spirit's greeting. She shared her own mistakes, the moments of panic in the caves, and the sting of community rejection, understanding that these failures were as vital to the curriculum as the successes. Yet a deep, quiet anxiety began to gnaw at her, watching Lyra fumble a formal greeting to a vine tender, or seeing Ember propose a wildly impractical idea for a new ritual. Elara had to physically stop herself from stepping in. Letting them learn from their own missteps felt like watching a sapling bend in a strong wind, terrified it would break. True leadership, she realized with painful clarity, was not about being the sole pillar of wisdom, but about nurturing the soil so other trees could grow strong. The decision was a risk that tightened her chest. She gave Lyra and Ember complete responsibility for organizing the upcoming Festival of First Fruits, a minor but beloved celebration. She provided them with the core principles and then stepped back, her promise not to interfere a heavy weight in her throat. The days leading up to the festival were a whirlwind of youthful energy and occasional chaos. She watched them debate, negotiate with vendors and spirits, and sometimes disagree passionately with each other. There were missteps, a moment when the ceremonial garlands were woven with a flower that irritated the badger spirit's sensitive noses, and a near disaster with a hastily built stage. But Elara held her tongue, offering only questions to guide their own problem solving. When the festival day dawned, it was not a perfect replica of the past. It was something new. Lyra and Ember had introduced a beautiful innovation, a joint storytelling hour where humans and spirits shared tales from their childhoods, a simple idea that fostered a deeper, more personal connection than any grand ritual could. The festival's success was a profound relief, a tangible sign that the culture could indeed sustain itself, that the knowledge was taking root in a new generation. Yet the small failures, the moments of friction, were a quiet reminder that their hard-won peace was a living thing, always growing and always in need of gentle, watchful care. Watching her apprentices laugh under the festival lanterns, surrounded by a community they were learning to lead, Elara felt a deep, quiet fulfillment. The forest was in good hands, but she knew that those hands would always need a steadying touch now and then. The road to the neighboring settlement felt both impossibly long and startlingly short. Elara walked beside Lyra and Ember, the fox wisp flickering nervously at her shoulder, their small group a quiet embassy of hope. The village of Oakhaven was nothing like the Tranquil Forest. Its high wooden palisade was stark and unadorned, and the faces that watched them enter were guarded, their eyes tracing Ember's luminous form with a mixture of fear and suspicion. The elder, a stern woman named Anya, greeted them with formal politeness that did nothing to mask her deep-seated doubt. "You speak of walking with spirits," she said, her voice cool. "Here, we walk with axes and plows. We control the land to survive it." The chasm between their worlds felt wider than any Elara had faced at home. She knew she could not speak of badger guardians or willow whispers here. To lead with the mythic would only confirm their fears of dangerous, uncontrollable magic. Her first decision was one of profound restraint. She would not perform a single ritual. Instead, for 3 days, she and her apprentices simply lived among them. Lyra helped in the fields, sharing simple techniques for soil health that required no spirit guidance. Elara sat with the elders, and she did not lecture. She listened. She heard their stories of harsh winters, of blights that had starved their grandparents, of a world that had always been an adversary to be conquered. And in those stories, she found her opening. She found the common ground. "You speak of your children's future," Elara said to Anya one evening by the central fire. "You want them to be safe, to be fed, to know their grandchildren. The spirits of my forest want the very same thing for their own. This is not about magic. It is about family. It is about ensuring the land itself becomes a partner in that future, not an enemy." She then told them a story. It was not about a mythic fox, but about a clever animal that showed a lost child how to find water during a drought. It was a human-scale tale of unexpected help, a seed of an idea that cooperation could yield rewards that force could not. She saw the subtle shift in a few faces, a flicker of curiosity behind the wall of fear. On their final morning, Elara asked for a single, small favor. She invited anyone who was willing to join her in a simple act of gratitude at the village's oldest apple tree. It was not a binding ritual, just a quiet moment of placing hands on the bark and thanking it for its shade and its fruit. To her surprise, Anya herself stepped forward, her calloused hand resting beside Elara's. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a single, perfect apple, ripened out of season, fell gently into the elder's open palm. It was a small miracle, a gift freely given, and it required no explanation. The suspicion in the air did not vanish, but it softened, replaced by a wondering silence. As they prepared to depart, Anya approached Elara, the unspoken question still in her eyes, but the hostility was gone. From a pouch at her belt, she produced a single, iridescent seed, its shell shimmering with a captured rainbow sheen. "This comes from a tree my great-grandmother planted," she said, her voice low. "It has not bloomed in my lifetime. We have forgotten how to make it grow. Perhaps in your forest, with your ways, it might remember. Take it. Let it be a new beginning for both our peoples." The weight of the seed in Elara's hand was immense. It was not just a gift, it was a test, a fragile trust placed in their care. A successful germination here could ignite a chain reaction of hope across the region. But if this seed died in the soil of the Tranquil Forest, it would prove to Oakhaven that the old, hard ways were the only ones that worked. The iridescent seed felt impossibly light in Elara's palm, a tiny vessel holding the fragile trust of Oakhaven. Back in the heart of the Tranquil Forest, she led a small, quiet procession to the community grove. There was no grand announcement, only the shared intention of villagers and spirits gathering around a patch of sun-warmed earth. Elara knelt, digging a small hole with her hands as the badger guardian looked on. A vine-tender spirit coiled gently around her wrist, guiding her to place the seed at just the right depth. Then, instead of a complex incantation, they simply began. A villager poured water from a shared cup. A willow wisp hummed a note of encouragement, and a child sprinkled a handful of rich, dark soil over the seed. It was a ceremony of pure, heartfelt cooperation, a promise made with actions, not just words. The response from the earth was immediate and breathtaking. A slender green shoot broke the surface within hours, unfurling its first leaves by nightfall. By the next morning, a young sapling stood where the seed had been, its bark shimmering with that same captured rainbow sheen. And within 3 days, it was a fully grown tree, its branches arching gracefully over the grove, heavy with luminescent fruits that pulsed with a soft, golden light. The first fruit to fall was given to an elder suffering from a deep, rattling cough that no village remedy could ease. One bite of the sweet, sun-warmed flesh, and the cough vanished, her breathing clear for the first time in years. The tree was not just a marvel, it was a living symbol, its very existence proof that trust planted between different worlds could yield miracles. Yet, the miracle brought a familiar chill of anxiety. What if others come not for peace, but to take this power for themselves? A young farmer voiced the concern many held in their hearts. We have worked so hard for this safety. Must we now risk it all over again? Elara listened, understanding the fear that had once built their walls. But we did not rebuild our world to hide its light, she replied, her voice calm but firm. A blessing hoarded becomes a curse. Our purpose is to share, to show that such harmony is possible. With the community's wary but willing agreement, she declared the shimmering tree a sanctuary for all beings, a place of healing and rest open to any who approached with peaceful intent. The decision transformed their forest. News of the miracle tree traveled on the wind and in the tales of travelers. Soon, pilgrims began to arrive. A family from a dust-choked plain came seeking a fruit to heal their ailing mother. A delegation of mountain spirits, their forms like living crystal, arrived to study the tree's roots and learn the principles of its magic. The Tranquil Forest was no longer just a home. It was becoming a center for cultural exchange, a living school where the story of coexistence was taught and retold with every new visitor. Standing beneath the tree's gently swaying branches, watching a group of Oakhaven children laugh with a family of fox wisps, Elara felt a profound shift in the air. A soft chime, like a crystal bell, sounded beside her. Lyra stood there, a scroll in her hand and a smile on her face. "The first joint meeting of the Storytellers Guild is ready to begin," she said. "They are all waiting for you." The hall of the Storytellers Guild was filled with a symphony of mismatched voices. Elara watched from her simple wooden chair as a human grandmother, her hands tracing patterns in the air, began a tale of the first snowfall. The moment she finished, a spirit of shimmering mist took her place, its form coalescing into shapes as it recounted a legend of the first to fall, a story of the same quiet beginnings seen through entirely different eyes. This was the Guild's purpose in action, not a museum for old tales, but a living forge for new ones. The air crackled with creative energy, but also with the friction of two artistic traditions colliding. A human poet proposed a structured epic with a clear moral, while a fox wisp argued for a story that ebbed and flowed like the wind, its meaning felt rather than explained. The debate threatened to stall their very first project. Elara stepped in not as a judge, but as a guide. "We are not here to choose one truth over the other," she offered. "We are here to find the harmony between them. Perhaps the epic has a rhythm that changes like the seasons, and the flowing story has a central heart as strong as an ancient tree." Her facilitation was a delicate dance, honoring the distinct beauty of each lineage while weaving them into something uniquely their own. To ensure this partnership remained at the Guild's core, she made a decisive ruling. From this day forward, she declared, every new story bearing the Guild's mark must be co-created by at least one human and one spirit. The decision was met with thoughtful silence, then nods of agreement. It was a simple rule with profound consequences. The stories that began to emerge from these collaborations were unlike anything the forest had ever known. They inspired songs that blended human melody with the chime of crystal leaves, and rituals where dance steps were guided by the sway of glowing vines. This was no longer just preservation. It was the active, joyful creation of a shared cultural identity, setting the narrative precedent for all the generations to come. As the inaugural meeting drew to a close, Lyra approached, holding a scroll bound with a braided cord of vine and thread. "The first official tale of the Storytellers Guild," she said, her voice brimming with pride. Elara accepted it, the parchment warm in her hands. That evening, by the soft light of her hearth, she carefully unrolled the beautifully illustrated scroll, eager to read the first true fruit of their united labor. The final volume felt heavy in her hands, its leather cover worn smooth by months of work. Elara placed it carefully on the shelf, completing the comprehensive archive that now filled an entire wing of the Storytellers Guild. This was not a collection of dusty facts, but a living library of their shared soul, a foundation for every child and every curious mind for generations to come. It held her own charcoal smudge journals, the Guild's first co-created tales, and the intricate lore of the spirits, all woven together into a single, continuous narrative. Teachers immediately began using its pages, their students wide-eyed as they learned of the fox spirit's cleverness and the Willow Whispers' wisdom. The archive became the heart of their new education system, a treasured resource that allowed them to understand their past so they could dream their future with clearer eyes. But some pages were far more difficult to write than others. Elara spent long nights staring at blank parchment, her pen hovering over the histories of the Great Schism and Finn's Blight. How could she describe the fear that built the walls, or the betrayal that twisted spirits into shadows, without planting new seeds of that same division? To omit the pain would be a lie, but to present it as a simple tale of villains and victims would only foster guilt and resentment. Her decision shaped the very conscience of their culture. She chose to frame every conflict as a lesson in resilience, every wound as an opportunity for reconciliation. She wrote not of monsters, but of misunderstanding, and emphasized the profound growth that came from choosing empathy over blame, from mending trust rather than punishing its breaking. The weight of this task was immense, a responsibility that kept her awake long after the candles had guttered out. The words she chose today would shape the forest's collective memory for centuries. Would this archive teach their descendants to live in wary fear of a painful past? Or would it inspire them to courageously protect a hard-won peace? Every sentence felt like a chisel mark on the stone of their identity. Getting it right meant fostering a legacy of unity, but a single misstep could subtly legitimize the old fears, creating fractures that might not appear for 100 years. She wrote and rewrote, her goal always to show that their history was not a chain of wrongs to be remembered, but a map of pitfalls to be avoided and bridges to be crossed again. With the last volume finally in its place, a profound quiet settled over her. She stepped out of the guild hall and into the dappled sunlight of the forest, the weight of the archive replaced by the lighter, more familiar burden of reflection. She walked without a destination, her feet carrying her along the paths she had once mapped with a trembling hand. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming moon bloom herbs and the soft chime of spirit song. She passed the now vibrant grove where the blight had once festered, and the great wall where ivy now grew over the old, fearful wards. Each step was a memory, a testament to the incredible journey from a lonely girl defying a wall to a woman who had helped rebuild a world. The path felt both endless and complete, a circle leading not back to the beginning, but forward into a future she had helped to write. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the first annual Unity Festival. For a full week, the village and the surrounding woods transformed into a living tapestry of shared celebration. Elara and her council had woven every thread of their hard-won peace into the event's fabric. There were spirit-guided tours where Willow Wisps led wide-eyed children to hidden groves, storytelling competitions where the voices of humans and badger beings intertwined, and bustling craft fairs where human blacksmiths worked alongside fire sprites to create jewelry of living metal and captured flame. The air hummed with a dozen different languages and the scent of shared feasts. This was not just a party, it was the culture they had rebuilt, made visible and joyous for all to experience. The festival's immediate success was undeniable. Visitors arrived from distant settlements and unseen spirit clans, their curiosity turning to wonder. The local economy, once reliant on isolated subsistence, blossomed with the exchange of unique crafts and foods, elevating the Tranquil Forest's prestige from a place of strange rumors to a destination of hope and learning. Yet organizing such a sprawling event tested their resources and their patience to the limit. A sudden downpour threatened to dissolve the intricate chalk murals drawn by children and crystal sprites, and for a tense hour, arguments flared over shelter and salvaging the art. Elara, moving calmly through the chaos, did not command a solution. Instead, she asked a simple question. The chalk may wash away, but will the memory of creating it together fade so easily? Her quiet reframing of the problem shifted the focus from loss to legacy, and soon villagers were offering their own cloaks to protect the art, while spirits wove a canopy of leaves overhead. It was a small moment that proved their cooperation was stronger than any misfortune. To reinforce this spirit, Elara introduced the gratitude circle at each day's end. It began hesitantly, a human farmer thanking a vine tender for helping save his storm-damaged crop. Then a shadow spirit, its voice rough but clear, expressed thanks to the child who had left a bowl of fresh water at the forest's edge during a heatwave. As the circle continued, story after story revealed the invisible web of small, kind acts that now bound their community, publicly affirming the behaviors that made their world work. The festival's triumphant success was a beacon, demonstrating to every visitor that a different way of life was not just possible, but profoundly beautiful. Yet Elara knew this very success raised the stakes. Maintaining this inclusive spirit against the pressures of growth and expectation would require even more continuous, deliberate effort than building it had. As the grand finale of fireworks, a collaboration of human chemistry and light spirit artistry, exploded in silent, shimmering flowers across the night sky, Elara felt the joyful noise of the crowd begin to recede. She slipped away from the celebrations, climbing a familiar path to a quiet hilltop that overlooked the entire, glittering scene. The sounds of laughter and music were a soft murmur here, a distant symphony of everything she had helped create. She did not have to wait long before the air grew still, and the forest sage emerged from the shadows between the trees, its antlers of living wood and captured starlight casting a gentle luminescence over the grass. It stood beside her, a silent, immense presence, and together they watched the fireworks reflected in 1,000 watching eyes below, human and spirit alike. The sky bruised to a deep, unsettling purple, and the air grew heavy with the taste of iron and ozone. It was not a natural storm. This tempest was woven from the last, frayed threads of the forest's old discord, a final, violent backlash from the forgotten schism itself. It gathered above the sanctuary grove, its dark heart fixed on the shimmering unity tree. The first bolt of lightning did not strike from the sky, but lashed sideways, a whip of raw malice that scorched the earth just feet from the tree's luminous roots. The message was unmistakable. This was an assault on their very symbol of peace. Panic erupted, a stark contrast to the recent festival's joy. Villagers screamed and spirits flickered, their forms wavering with primal fear. In that chaos, Elara's voice cut through, not with a shout, but with a resonant calm that carried the weight of all her hard-won experience. She did not command them to be brave. She reminded them who they were. "Remember the sapling we planted together," she called out, her words finding every ear. "Remember the trust that made this tree grow." This storm is the echo of a pain we have already healed. It has no power over us unless we surrender the harmony we have built. Her leadership in that moment was not about dictating a plan, but about reminding them of their collective strength. She directed the Badger Guardians to anchor the ritual with their deep, grounding power, while the Willow Wisps were tasked with weaving a lattice of calming energy above the crowd. Farmers were paired with vine tenders, their hands joined to channel strength into the soil, and the shadow spirits, who understood this destructive energy best, were asked to form the outer ring, their own dark light, a buffer against the storm's aggression. Every role was essential, and every being had to perform their part in perfect, trusting synchronization. The ritual began as a fragile hum against the storm's roar. Elara stood before the unity tree, the crystalline leaf in one hand and the Moonstone Flute in the other, and she played. The melody was not one of defiance, but of profound connection, a song that wove together every strand of hope and cooperation they had nurtured. As she played, the villagers and spirits focused their will, their collective intention flowing into a single, radiant shield of golden light that bloomed around the grove. The storm raged against it, striking the shield with concussive force, each impact threatening to shatter their concentration and their courage. Cracks of black energy spiderwebbed across the glowing dome, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed it would not hold. Elara's fingers never faltered on the flute. She poured every memory, every story, every hard-learned lesson of empathy into that final, sustained note. She saw Finn, the redeemed Saboteur, straining beside the Shadow Leader. She saw Lyra and Ember, their young faces set with determination. She saw Elder Kale, and even a hesitant Morwen, all giving everything they had. With a final, unified surge of will, the shield blazed with the intensity of a newborn star, and the storm shattered against it, dissolving into a harmless, gentle rain that washed the grove clean. The silence that followed was absolute, then broken by a single, clear chime from the unity tree. They had not just survived, they had transformed the last vestige of the old conflict into a nourishing peace. Elara lowered the flute, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her spirit was steadier than ever before. The storm had been the ultimate test, and their unity had proven strong enough to withstand even nature's wrath. Finally, and irrevocably cementing the future she had fought so hard to secure. Rain washed the air clean, leaving the scent of wet earth and blooming night flowers in its wake. Elara stood with her people beneath the branches of the unity tree, its luminous leaves glistening with droplets that caught the emerging starlight. There were no cheers, only a deep, shared silence that was richer than any celebration. Her gaze traveled over the faces around her, human and spirit alike, and she felt the weight of the journey not as a burden, but as a part of her own bones. She was no longer the girl who had crept beyond the wall with a charcoal stick and a desperate hope. She had become a living bridge, a weaver of worlds, and she finally understood that true culture was not a relic to be preserved under glass. It was a conversation, a continuous, breathing collaboration that changed with every new voice that joined the chorus. The Tranquil Forest was now a living testament to that truth. Its stories were no longer just human tales of survival, but epic poems co-authored with badger guardians and fox wisps. Its traditions were dances where human steps learned the rhythm of the turning seasons from vine tenders and willow whispers. This was a harmony that welcomed difference, allowing it to create a more beautiful and resilient whole. Elara knew, with a calm certainty, that this was not a final victory. The world was vast, and new challenges would always gather at the edges, waiting for their turn. Storms would come, disagreements would flare, and there would be days when the old fear would whisper from the shadows. But the foundation they had built was unshakable, rooted not in stone or magic, but in the fertile soil of empathy, in the shared memory of their history, and in the daily, active choice to cooperate. Her personal quest was over, but the forest's great story was just beginning its next chapter. It was a story that would be told by the children learning in the guild hall, by the travelers carrying seeds of hope to distant lands, and by the spirits who now knew their names would never be forgotten again. It was a promise, whispered on the wind and written in the light of the unity tree, that these tales would forever grow, adapt, and inspire long after her own story had become one of the legends sung beneath its branches.
you.